Welcome to the Hockey Writers Fantasy Forecheck, where we talk to you about all things fantasy, keeper league, redraft, and dynasty. We're going to give you hot players to pick up, prospects on the rise, sleepers you should or shouldn't think of acquiring, and prospects who are looking to break out at the NHL level. This week, we will be discussing streaky players, when to hold them, when to fold them. I'm your host, Caleb Kerney, and with me today is a special guest, former writer at the Hockey Writers and present editor and writer for Dauber Prospects, as well as co-host of the one and only Fantasy Hockey Life podcast. It's the lean, mean scouting machine, Victor Nuno. Victor, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome, Carol. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to work with you over the years here, and definitely looking forward to talking some fantasy hockey with you today.
Yeah, it's we've known each other for quite a bit, and we've worked together. Yeah, as you kind of mentioned, and yeah, excited to talk some fantasy. So we're gonna hop right into it. We're gonna start with a hot player here, out of Phoenix, Nick Schmaltz. And now Nick Schmaltz, in his last 4 games played, he's got 4 goals, 3 assists for 7 points. Yeah, over that span, averaging 20 and a half minutes a night, almost 3 minutes of power play time on ice, 13 shots, 0 hits. So some nice point and category coverage, except for the hits. He's not really known to be a hitter, though, so that's not something to really expect from him. On the season, in 34 games played, he's got 11 goals, 17 assists for 28 points, which is not too bad. Over the season, 19 and a half minutes of average time on ice, 2 minutes, 55 seconds of power play time on ice. So, the last 4 games, he's kind of seen an uptick, mostly in even strength minutes, as his power play time on ice is pretty similar to his average for the season. As for if it's kind of sustainable or not, he has a high secondary assist percentage right now, but his shooting percentage is 15.9% for this year, and his career average is 13.9. So he's kind of in the ballpark. It seems like it might be a touch high, but it's still kind of in that range. But last year he was at like 18.7% shooting. So, in keeping with today's topic and theme, Victor, are you holding Schmaltz? Or are you folding him?
Well, I guess I'll have to say folding, but I mean, obviously you hold him while he's streaky, but you think you have to know that the floor is going to fall out of someone like Schmaltz. I mean, the thing is, guys that don't shoot like him, they tend to be streaky, and you want them while the streak is on, but they can go real cold. And there's a lot of luck metrics that are present for Nick Schmaltz, and so you have to know that that's probably not going to necessarily continue. And he's done this before many times. He goes through streaks, and when he's hot, he's fantastic, and then he doesn't do much at times when he's cold. And if you play in peripheral leagues that count the shots and the hits and stuff, he's also pretty difficult to hold because he doesn't really do anything, as you mentioned, other than get points when he's getting points, and that's fantastic. So points only league, you love Nick Schmaltz, and you're loving life right now. So I would hold him while I can. I mean, if you had an opportunity to turn him into a sustainable 70 plus point guy, then I would do that. I don't think many people would trade that player for you because they probably know. But yeah, that's basically what I would think about Nick Schmaltz. I never really trust this. Every time it happens, I never really trust the production. When I look under the hood, there's always like this background of heavy luck metrics whenever he's doing this. And so it's fun while it lasts, but don't expect it to keep going forever.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Schmaltz is just that like super streaky guy. Even in like a dynasty league, I wouldn't really keep him just because of the lack of peripherals. I like to have the floor of just decent peripherals to go along with those points, and only getting a couple shots a game is less than ideal. But yeah, hold him while he's hot. Fold him if you can get a good asset for him. One asset that you probably could try to get for him but you'd probably have to package something together, is our prospect on the rise. And this week, the one and only Lane Hutson. I mean, what can you say about this kid? He's tearing up the NCAA in his last 9 games played. He's got 16 points. So that's all since the World Juniors concluded. He's got 35 points on the season, which is only 5 points ahead of Luke Hughes, who's a sophomore. He's growing, which I think he's at like 5'10" now. I think the last time I checked. And when he was drafted, I believe he was 5'8". Maybe Victor, you can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But yeah, what do you think, Victor? Do you think you could package something with Schmaltz to get Hutson, or is that going to be a bit of a reach depending on what that other asset is?
Yeah, I'd be down with that. I totally agree with you on Schmaltz too. Just the liking players that have more of a peripheral floor. They're doing something for you. But yeah, Hutson is amazing. And yeah, I think he was 5'8", maybe even 5'7". He was really small. But that's part of the issue. But the other part of the issue with Hutson, you can't deny the offense. He's creative. He's got great vision. He has great offensive instincts. He's not bad defensively, but he's small, so it's difficult to fend off some of the bigger forwards in the slot and the boards. But also, like, his skating is just not very good, and he's been exposed a couple times in college already, and that has a long ways to go. So he still really needs to work on that. I love the guy. I was really high on him too. I had him ranked somewhere in the teens last year, and I mean, I understand why he fell, to where he did in the actual draft because of his size. But I love him. I think he has a lot of upside. There is still a universe where he never quite pans out just because of the size and the skating, though. So there's a little bit of a risk there. But I would absolutely want to roster him in a dynasty league because the upside is just so big, and high point scoring defensemen are just so hard to come by. So he's someone that I would definitely try to acquire if the price is reasonable. On the other hand, if someone wanted to pay me like Luke Hughes for Lane Hutson, I would take that in a heartbeat because Luke Hughes is going to be for sure an NHLer. I mean, there's no question. He's got the pedigree, he's got the size, the skating, the skill. He's already demonstrated an international stage how close he is to NHL ready. So as much as I like Lane Hutson, I would definitely take a more sure thing than him in a trade like that because, why not, right? I mean, the upside is also kind of similar, I would think. What about you, Caleb?
Yeah, kind of a similar upside. I mean, like Hutson, his skating, yeah, like you said, it isn't amazing, but he's got the good edges to kind of, be slippery when he's in the offensive zone and maintain possession, especially like on the power play kind of a thing. But yeah, a lot is going to depend on development for Hutson. And I like what the Canadiens are kind of doing now with their sort of new approach to, the coaching with, Martin St. Louis and just everybody else that they've brought on board to help develop their prospects. They're doing some good work over there in that new regime. And yeah, the upside is similar. Maybe he needs to be paired with like a Caden Gooley. Maybe that's a future pairing. Someone who is more defensively sound than him, who, while Hutson tries to acclimate to the NHL, if he gets the opportunity, somebody who can cover up those mistakes, because there will be those mistakes, there will be those lapses. He will get beat, but Hudson's a competitive guy, and he's going to do everything he can to improve himself to make sure that he plays a better all-around game. So I got a lot of faith in Hutson. And one guy who's kind of on a bit of a cold streak right now, who I have a lot of faith in personally, is Nikolaj Ehlers. Nikolaj Ehlers, in his last 4 games played, he only has 1 assist on 13 shots and 1 hit. Yeah, he's averaging, 17 minutes and 47 seconds of time on ice in those 4 games, 3 minutes and 49 seconds of power play time on ice in those games. And across the whole season, he's doing pretty fantastic given that he hasn't played as much as everybody else. He's only played in 16 games because of injuries. He's only got 4 goals, but he does have 14 assists for 18 points. So he's over a point per game this year, in 16 minutes and 56 seconds of average time on ice per game and 3 minutes and 33 seconds of power play time on ice in game. So lately he has seen that uptick a bit in power play time and average time on ice to try and get him going a little bit. And the big thing with Ehlers this year is he's only at 7.7% shooting for the year. His career average is 11.9%. So there's definitely some space for some positive regression there. And it's my personal opinion that he's a perfect buy low candidate, especially if there's a team that's in, win now mode, and maybe they're frustrated with Ehlers because he's not producing like they thought he would. And they're maybe trying to get somebody who is more hot right now, or just something to give their team a boost so that they can finish at the top of the standings. They might be willing to make a trade there. So Victor, what do you think? Are you going to hold Ehlers if you have him and he's cold, or are you gonna trade him and hope that you're the team that's looking to acquire him?
Well, I'm definitely going to buy Nick Ehlers if I can, or hold him. He's always been a favorite of mine, and one of the biggest issues has always been his power play deployment and time on ice. He's consistently over the years been one of the top 5-on-5 producers at even strength and expected goals and actual points per 60. And so he's, right in his prime. He's 26. Yeah, he had the injury, but you just look at the on pace numbers and he's doing great. You mentioned he's a little slow. Maybe that's a reason you could get him. That would be great if you could, because I have a lot of faith in him. His time on ice has been, kind of creeping up too a little bit, and he's getting more power play time on ice than he ever has. You mentioned his low shooting percentage. That would be the thing that you would expect to regress, and he's already on a 92-point pace. So if that comes up, then you're talking about century mark and above. He's a great player though, and Winnipeg seems to be kind of turning things around too, so that's helpful. You got Wheeler back being the playmaker. You got PLD, breaking out huge this year. So there's a lot of things going right, and I think Ehlers is going to be a part of that. And it's nice that they have 2 strong centers. Before it was like, who are you going to play with if it's not Scheifele? And now it's like you could play with either Scheifele or PLD. It's going to be great either way, right? So that helps. And being on the power play, top power play is going to be helpful. So I definitely would want him. I actually did trade for him in a salary cap league, going for it, pushing my chips in. So I'm definitely all about Nick Ehlers. I think he's definitely someone you want. And if anyone is a little hesitant based on the injury and based on the slight cold streak, then maybe you could pry him away from the owners. What do you think, Caleb?
Yeah, I'm curious, what did you give up to get Ehlers?
Let me double check. Hopefully you can edit this out.
Because that's I think that would be interesting to just get a better sense, for people watching and listening today, of like the kind of package that you could put together, to get a guy like Ehlers. Maybe it's Schmaltz and some kind of prospect. Like, I don't know if I would personally do like Schmaltz and Hutson for Ehlers. I personally would want to hold on to Hutson. But maybe like if you could do something like even Marchenko and Schmaltz for Ehlers, depending on your league settings, that might fly. So there's definitely a lot of different options that you could come up with to try and acquire him. But at the same time, you need to kind of offer somebody something. So maybe that Schmaltz for Hutson to acquire Ehlers might work. What do you think of that, Victor?
Yeah, I think it depends on the team, obviously, that's trading that. If you're a bottom team and you have Ehlers and it's really going to help a team that's going for it, is Hutson and Schmaltz attractive enough, to move a player that's strong? I think that I probably would not. I think I would probably hold. But yeah, I think the nice thing about Dynasty is that you can package in different ways depending on where the teams are in the standing. This is also a cap league, and so Ehlers' relatively high cap hit was a factor. And luckily, my team's near the cap, near the top of the league, and we had Pacioretty go down, so that opened up a little bit of cap, and so I was able to get Ehlers, and I had to give Simon Edvinsson, who I love. And so that
Yeah.
was the price, and a third round pick, which is not really
Okay.
anything. So it's
Yeah.
basically Ehlers for Edvinsson, and that obviously was very attractive to the rebuilding team because that's going to be a strong piece for them for years to come.
No doubt. That's 100%. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And somebody else who's looking like they're going to be, a strong player for years to come for their team is, the last section here for, breakout candidate for prospects is, Dallas's Wyatt Johnston. And this guy, he's been playing great this year. In 51 games on the season, he's got 13 goals, 9 assists, for 22 points. So he's getting close to half a point per game. And you in fantasy, you like to see somebody with a bit more goals than assists. Obviously there's, sustainability. Like, can he maintain that? Probably not. Is he going to start to get more secondary assists? All that sort of thing. Those are all questions that kind of come up, but in his last 5 games played, he's got 4 points. He's got 13 hits, or not 13 hits, 13 shots. I think it was something like 4 hits is actually what it was. But, his time on ice is pretty decent for a rookie right now. His past 5 games, he's played 15 minutes, 34 seconds, 16 minutes, 21 seconds, 15 minutes, 14 minutes, 30 seconds, 13 minutes, 29 seconds. So that is the kind of thing that you do like to see with rookie forwards. You don't want to see the Shane Wright treatment of, not a sniff more than 10 minutes over everything that they play. Because the coach needs to trust them, and they need to balance the risk of potential defensive lapses with the potential upside of the production. So, Victor, what do you think of Wyatt Johnston this year? Is he a guy that you're holding, or are you folding?
I'm definitely holding Wyatt Johnston if I can. If I'm a competitive team like I was just describing, he's a piece that I would certainly trade if I could get a top end player like an Ehlers to help with my championship run. But if aside from that, I'm holding Wyatt Johnston at all costs because he's been phenomenal, especially considering, he was in his draft year, he didn't play in the OHL because of the shutdown and was great in the World Juniors, and then absolutely tore it up last year, almost 2 points per game for the Windsor Spitfires, was just phenomenal. And I remember thinking, between him and Maverick Bourque, I thought Bourque was a lot closer to NHL ready, but he could go to the AHL. So I remember thinking, like, I wonder if they'll just put, Bourque in the AHL and let Johnston, see if he can make the team. I didn't really think that he'd do this well. I thought that he might stick around and play more of a role, bottom middle six kind of thing. But he's been great. As you mentioned, the time on ice, almost 15 minutes. That's pretty good for sure forward. I mean, what he's doing at 19 is really impressive. 35-point pace and, minimal peripherals, but, he's got some in there. He's not like Nick Schmaltz level. He's a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
And, the only thing that I'm thinking in my head is like, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Cole Sillinger last year, who made the team and was really great, and then is having a massive sophomore slump. I think that's certainly possible, but I think it's a little different in Dallas because Dallas has that phenomenal top line that just trucks other teams and allows a lot of space and matchups to play out with the other lines. And Columbus doesn't really have that. Plus, they had Boone Jenner out, and so they asked a lot of Cole Sillinger too early, and I think that was a big reason for his slowdown. Johnston is a different kind of player. He's not the player who's gonna drive the whole offense as a two-way center. He's definitely more offense, and so he needs someone to kind of help do some of that for him. And we'll see. I think that they can have some players do that for him, and he can be a great complementary offensive forward. So I think that he can probably build on that. I mean, he's a guy who definitely has point per game upside, down the line. I don't know about next year, but 2-3 years, he's a forward you're going to want, who's going to be Dallas has some good prospects too, aside from him. So I think that if you can, I would definitely hold him. But if you can get a sure thing, near point per game player, then yeah, definitely trade him for that.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest takeaways about having, a really good prospect is you don't want to just trade that for just more futures. That just puts you back. That doesn't really make too much sense. But if you can trade that in a dynasty league for, like you're saying, more of a sure thing, that's definitely the route to go. And then, last thing on Johnston, he does have the cushion of also the second line of, Ben and Sagan still around. So like you're saying with the matchups, he can get more offensive zone starts and really feed off of his offensive game, as long as he has somebody else on his line who can complement him in that way and drive some plays so that he can have the time and space to do what he does well. So that's going to conclude the end of our kind of sections for the episode. And now we're going to get into our topic of the week, which is streaky players, when to hold them, when to fold them. And we've been kind of talking about this a little bit as we've gone along. Personally for myself, a couple of things that I look for in hot or cold players is shooting percentage versus career shooting percentage, as well as, secondary assist percentage. If they're getting a lot of secondary assists compared to like what they normally get, that obviously is going to regress in some fashion because there's always a chance that they could just have a super lucky season. It could continue for the season, but then not be there next season. It's one of those really unpredictable stats that you kind of look at, you kind of think, okay, there's a chance it could go this way or that way, but then you don't put a lot more stock into it than that. Time on ice, you're also looking for, are they getting the opportunity? If they're super hot, but they're only playing like 11 minutes a night, that's a prime regression candidate. I would think so. So what do you think of that general assessment, Victor? Are there other metrics that you would look at when assessing streaky players other than secondary assists, time on ice, and shooting percentage versus career shooting percentage?
Yeah, I definitely look at those. Those are really good ones to look at right off the bat. There's a couple other ones I would say. PDO is one. PDO is one metric. It's kind of sometimes you'll see it listed as save versus SH, save versus plus shooting percentage. That's basically what it is. PDO is a combination of shooting percentage and save percentage of the goaltender while you're on the ice. And so basically that number should add up to 100 or 1,000. It's often listed. And so right around 1,000 is neutral. And above that, you're probably getting a little bit lucky. You're shooting a little bit high, or the goalie is a little bit not doing as well. And if you're below that, then you are probably getting a bit unlucky. And so as a general rule, if you have a low PDO, you can expect to regress up towards the mean and get a few more points. And if you're well above, then you might have to regress down and not have as many points. I should say, though, there are some players, and you can probably imagine who they are, the best players in the league, that just rock a high PDO for their entire career. I'm just looking at, I have Nick Ehlers pulled up, and he's out with someone who has never had a PDO below 1,000. Of course, like your Crosbys and your McDavid's is like ridiculous. It's always super high. And so some players are just that good. But for your average NHLer or even your good NHLer, they're going to have streaks where it's high and low, and you're going to regress. The other one is the individual points participation, IPP. And if you're on the power play, it's a power play IPP, and that's basically the points participation for when you're out there. And so if you're on the ice when a goal is scored and you're part of it, then you have you're part of it, so you get counted that. If you're not, then you fail. And so it's the percentage of time. And if you think about it, there's 5 skaters on the ice generally, unless it's a shorthanded goal or 3-on-3. So what's the likelihood that you're going to get in on a goal assist, or a secondary assist? The percent is, you're basically 3 out of 5, right? So you have unless there's only one assist, or it's a, just a unassisted goal. So the chances are generally pretty good that you're going to get in on it. And so that's generally around 60%, which is right around where that number should be. Some good players can rock a little bit higher, like close to 70. But if you're rocking a IPP of like 30-40%, that's going to go up. Like you're just getting incredibly unlucky. You're out there and not getting on any of the points. So that's another one that you have to think at. And then some people are actually really high, and so they might be like at 85% IPP, and you're thinking like, there's no way that this is going to continue. That is going to come down, and you're going to lose some points. So between those things you mentioned, high A2s, time on ice, shooting percentage, and then PDO plus IPP, if you look at all those numbers, you can get a pretty good idea of what's going on with somebody. Are they getting lucky, unlucky? Is this going to continue? And it's just math. So can people actually continue this all season, or can this streak go on for a while? Sure, anything's possible, but the likelihood is that things are going to regress, numbers are going to come back to an average, and it's gonna play out over time. And that's what you can kind of bet on.
Right. And so if I'm understanding you correctly about the IPP and the PDO, 60% IPP is a good baseline, and because that's the 3 out of 5, right? Yeah, that math checks out. And
yep,
1,000 or 100 for PDO is neutral. So those are the key numbers to kind of remember when you're looking at those. I know Dauber Frozen Pool is a good resource to find all these numbers. There's other good resources that you'd need to pay to access, in some cases like Evolving Hockey and things like that. But Dauber Frozen Pool is the one that is free. And so that's a great resource. Use that as much as you can. But yeah, I think those are good. Those are some good things to take a look at. Now, is there anything outside of those 5 metrics, or maybe within those 5 metrics, that you think is a really big red flag when you see that in a player that is either cold or hot?
Yeah, well, I think any of those that are really off would give me pause. So super high or low PDO, high or low IPP, really really low shooting percentage. A lot of people will trade someone and in fantasy, and you look at their shooting percentage and it's super low or super high, and then I was like, that's, I wouldn't do that. I would just kind of wait for that to play out. The other thing that's a little bit maybe more advanced is a lot of sites, like you mentioned, Evolve in Hockey, and Natural Stat Trick, other places have expected goals. And so one thing that I like to look at is their expected goals versus their actual goals. So if their expected goals is much higher than their actual goals, then they're also getting a bit unlucky. And that isn't necessarily always reflected in their shooting percentage, because they take into account other metrics that aren't directly just shooting. So they could be generating a lot of offense, but, maybe other people are cashing in, and maybe the play happened, a pass or two before they got the assist. So it's possible that they are generating and driving play, but not cashing in. And so if their expected goals are much higher, then that's something that I would expect would improve. On the other hand, a lot of times, and Nick Schmaltz is a classic example of this, their actual goals are way higher than their expected numbers. And so on the other hand, you're thinking, okay, they're getting a bit lucky. They're not actually doing the hard work. There maybe some bounces, bouncing off defender skates, or, accidental tips. That's going to show up as sort of luck in the higher actual goals than expected goals. And Evolving Hockey has these really nice graphs where you don't actually have to look at the numbers. You can just look at the bar graphs, and you can see that one is super, super higher than the other. And you can kind of just visually see, oh yeah, this guy's getting super lucky, or this guy is due for more points. And so those are other things that I kind of look at.
Perfect. That's a great place to end the show today, Victor. Thanks again for coming on, and thank you to the audience for tuning in. Next week, we'll go back to our regular hosts, and we'll be discussing the topic, what to do about goalies. You can follow us on social media. You can follow Victor Nuno. He's on Twitter at Victor Nuno 12. You can also follow the podcast on Twitter, and that's at THW Fantasy. I'm on Twitter at Caleb Scouting. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel. If you are listening in podcast format, subscribe to the podcast, and please leave us a review on whatever platform you listen to. You've been listening to the Hockey Writers Fantasy Forecheck. Keep your stick on the ice, get pucks in deep, and give it 110%, eh? I'll see you next week.